I want everyone's attention here. My name is Homer Plessy, and I just want all of you to know that I am black. Yes, despite what you might see with my light skin, I, according to the law, have one great-grandparent who is of African descent, meaning that I am also a colored person under the law, but I was able to purchase a ticket on this all-white train car.
Boy, you better get yourself off this train if you know what's good for you.
No, I am not moving. You are just going to have to arrest me.
On an all-white train car in 1892, Homer Plessy stood and announced to the entire train that he was breaking the law. Plessy would go on to become an example for generations of ordinary people for how to test unfair laws in the courts. At the end of the Civil War, 3 new constitutional amendments promised a new day for African Americans. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment guaranteed equal protection of the laws to all citizens. And the 15th Amendment granted African Americans the right to vote. Now armed with a political voice, the minority population succeeded in voting in many of their own representatives into state and federal governments. By 1870, 7 former Confederate states had elected black politicians to national office, a true demonstration of democracy. But efforts by resentful Southern Democrats soon decimated the political gains made by African Americans. In 1877, federal troops were pulled out of the South, allowing Southern state lawmakers to implement poll taxes and literacy tests, de-enfranchising African Americans and suppressing their democratic voice. With political representation dwindling, African Americans needed a new way to stand up for themselves. In 1870, white supremacists in Louisiana passed the Separate Car Act, which required segregated railroad cars for black and white passengers. Since black Americans had no representation in Congress, the Citizens Committee set out to nullify the law through the courts, and in order to construct a test case, they first needed somebody to get arrested, a brave individual to stand up against Jim Crow. The Citizens Committee selected a 1/8 black man named Homer Plessy to be their test case, hoping his light skin would allow him to easily enter the whites-only train car. On June 7, 1892, he successfully boarded the East Louisiana Railroad when the train began moving. Plessy stood up and announced to the conductor that under Louisiana's one-drop rule, he was legally black. He has to bring his racial ancestry to the attention of the conductor in order to get arrested. The other people in the train car found this absurd and stared at Homer Plessy like, "Why are you asking to get arrested?" The conductor stopped the train, then a private detective stepped onto the train and asked Plessy to exit. When he refused, the detective arrested Homer Plessy. The Citizens Committee appealed to the district court, claiming Plessy's arrest was unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The case ascended the court system, and in 1896, Plessy vs. Fergurson arrived at the United States Supreme Court. But the Supreme Court upheld the Louisiana segregation law in a 7-1 ruling. The majority opinion argued that separate facilities could be equal. The decision introduced a new social doctrine: separate but equal. Now armed with the constitutional basis for segregation, states throughout the South passed laws mandating a stricter separation of the races. Instead of ending segregation, Plessy vs. Fergurson had ushered in the era of Jim Crow. But despite its adverse social impact, Homer Plessy's stand demonstrated the potential for test cases to empower minority groups. Seeing this, black activists formed the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. This group set out to fight racist legislation through the courts by enabling individuals to take a stand. Their mission was to end Jim Crow. Unfortunately, what Homer Plessy was hoping for when he got arrested did not happen. The lawsuit just made things worse by making Jim Crow laws legal, the awful precedent of separate but equal. But it also created the precedent of ordinary people going before a public body like the courts and ultimately the Supreme Court in order to correct the injustice they see in the world.
Justice is juxtaposition in us. Justice for all just ain't specific enough. One son died, the spirit is revisiting us. True and living in us. Resistance is us. That's why Rosa sat on the bus. That's why we walk through Ferguson with our hands up. When it go down, we woman and man up. They say stay down, and we stand up. Shots be on the ground, the camera panned up. King pointed to the mountaintop, and we ran up.